Sometimes people don't pull away because they lost interest, but because they started to feel too much. One day, everything feels easy. The conversations flow. The energy is warm. There's a kind of quiet certainty that this connection is real. And then, something changes. Not loudly. Not with a fight or a clear reason. Just a slow, almost invisible shift. Shorter messages, less warmth. A presence that starts to feel more like an absence. And the strangest part? You can't point to a single moment where it went wrong. This is one of the most disorienting experiences in human connection. Because the mind desperately wants a reason. It wants a cause. Something concrete to hold on to. So it starts searching. Did I say something? Was I too available? Not available enough? Did I misread the whole thing? And the searching itself becomes exhausting, because no clear answer comes. But here's what most people never notice in these moments. The shift rarely begins when you first feel it. It begins much earlier, quietly, beneath the surface, in a place that isn't visible from the outside. To understand why people pull away, you have to stop looking at the surface level. What was said, what wasn't said, what happened or didn't happen. And start looking at something deeper. Every person who enters a connection brings something invisible with them. Their history, their patterns, their internal relationship with closeness itself. And those invisible things don't disappear just because the connection feels good. In fact, sometimes it's precisely because the connection feels good that they start to activate. There's a concept in psychology that explains a lot of this. It's called the window of tolerance, the range of emotional intensity a person can experience and still feel okay. For some people, that window is wide. They can hold a lot of warmth, a lot of closeness, a lot of emotional momentum, and it feels natural. Grounding, even. But for others, especially people who grew up in environments where connection was inconsistent, unpredictable, or conditional, that window is narrower. Not because anything is wrong with them, but because their nervous system learned early on that closeness comes with uncertainty, that warmth doesn't always last, that the closer you get, the more there is to lose. And when a new connection starts to feel genuinely good, consistently warm, emotionally safe, real, something unexpected can happen inside that person. Their system starts to register the intensity, not as danger, not as something bad, but as too much, more than the window can comfortably hold. And the response, almost automatic, almost unconscious, is to create space. From the outside, it looks like they lost interest. From the inside, it feels like coming up for air. And this is where the confusion begins, because those two experiences are completely different stories about the exact same moment. The person receiving the distance sees a withdrawal, a change, possibly a rejection. The person creating the distance often isn't even fully aware of what's happening. They just know they need to step back. They feel restless, vaguely overwhelmed, like something was moving too fast, even if the pace seemed completely normal to everyone else. There's another layer to this that most people overlook. Connection requires something that's easy to underestimate: emotional availability. Not just the desire to connect, but the actual capacity to show up, consistently, presently, without being pulled in 20 other directions at once. Think about how many people in this country are running on empty, working jobs that drain them, carrying stress they haven't processed, managing responsibilities that leave very little room for anything else, and then someone enters their life who is warm, attentive, consistent. At first it's wonderful, it feels like exactly what they needed, but gradually, as the connection deepens, as it starts to ask for more presence, more vulnerability, more consistency in return, something shifts. Not because they stopped caring, but because they were already stretched thin before the connection even began. And when you're stretched thin, even something good can start to feel like weight. So they step back, not as a decision they made deliberately, more like a reflex, a quiet retreat back to the emotional bandwidth they actually have. But here's what most people never notice, and this might be the most important part of all of this. Sometimes people pull away not because things went wrong, but because things felt too right. There's a pattern that shows up again and again in how humans relate to one another, and it has to do with what feels familiar. We're drawn to familiarity, sometimes even more than we're drawn to what's actually good for us. If someone grew up with emotional distance as a constant, a parent who was there physically but not emotionally, relationships that always seemed to plateau before they got too close, then distance becomes the known landscape. It doesn't feel comfortable exactly, but it feels recognizable. And when a new connection offers something different, steady warmth, clear communication, actual emotional safety, it can feel, at a subconscious level, almost disorienting. Not bad, not wrong, but unfamiliar. And unfamiliar, even when it's better, can quietly activate an internal system that says, "This isn't what I know." So the person starts to recreate what they know, not out of cruelty, not because they don't value the connection, but because the nervous system is, in a very literal way, trying to return to what feels like home, even when home was never quite right. And this is where the confusion becomes its deepest, because from the outside, you were doing everything right. The connection was real. The warmth was genuine, and it still shifted. It doesn't look dramatic, but it changes everything when you realize that someone pulling away is often not a verdict on you at all. It's a window into what they know, what they can hold, what their system is capable of receiving right now, in this moment of their life. There's one more piece to this that's worth understanding. In the early stages of any connection, there's a kind of openness. No expectations have formed yet. No unspoken agreements exist. Everything is still fluid, still possible, still exploratory. But time changes that. Quietly. Even without a single conversation about it, both people start to develop internal maps of what this connection is, what it means, and where it's going. And sometimes, without either person fully realizing it, those maps start to diverge. One person begins to feel that things are naturally progressing, deepening, moving toward something. The other person begins to feel pressure, not because anything explicit was said, but because they sense the growing weight of expectation, and they're not sure they can meet it. So they create distance, not as a statement, not even as a choice exactly, just as a way of managing something internal that has started to feel too heavy to carry in the way the connection now seems to require. Slowly now, because this is the part that matters most. When the distance comes, when the warmth fades without explanation, the natural response is to focus outward, to analyze what happened, to search for the mistake, the moment, the cause. But what if the most honest answer has almost nothing to do with anything that happened on the outside? What if the shift was always, mostly, about something internal? A window of tolerance quietly narrowing, a nervous system returning to familiar ground, a person reaching the edge of what they could hold. And none of it was ever really about you? That question doesn't make the distance painless. It doesn't make the confusion disappear. But it changes the shape of it. Because when you stop asking, "What did I do?" and start asking what might have been happening beneath the surface, something opens up. A little more room. A little more clarity. The experience stops being a verdict and starts being something much more honest. Two people, two different internal worlds, and a connection that encountered the limits of one of them. Not every withdrawal is a failure. Not every distance means something was wrong. Sometimes the people who pull away are the ones who felt something most acutely and simply didn't have the internal space to stay inside it. And that quiet truth, the one that doesn't come with an announcement or an explanation, is often the real story beneath every sudden silence.